Well, that leads into my second. There were the allegations of the sexual abuse.
Right.
So I don't know, and apparently it had been going on for quite a while, even as the boys were older. So I don't know if that was the catalyst for it, but I tend to think with the speed in which they ran through all that money.
Mm-hmm.
Warning. The podcast you're about to listen to may contain graphic descriptions of violent assaults, murder, and adult language. Listener discretion is advised.
The Murder Police Podcast. 3 things. The Menendez Brothers Murder Investigation. Welcome to the Murder Police Podcast. We're here with another episode of 3 Things. Today we're going to discuss the Menendez brothers. One of my favorites I've been watching for some time now. David, how are you?
Doing good. Looking forward to doing another one of these. And I know this speaks to you quite a bit.
It does. I've been following this since 1989.
And I have to admit that like on most contemporary cases, I'm in the dark. So I'm looking forward to people when they comment on YouTube to educate me on this a little bit. I have some ideas and I've researched slightly, but I learn a lot.
So you should have sat and watched that show with me when I sat and watched the most recent release. I think it was on Netflix.
Yeah, and I think I got to thinking today, I think that the reason I'm behind is that I was doing my own cases when these happened or close to it.
Yes.
And was kind of busy. But yeah, so we're going to do the 3 things concept again, which I think is fun. And it's neat to watch people when they interact with us and share their ideas. But we have to get something out of the way real quick because we've shot a couple episodes and you've had a change in the way you look, and it's your
You're envious is what it is.
That's what it is. It's your pickleball glasses.
Okay, I do not play pickleball. I don't play racquetball.
That house smells suspiciously of dill. That's all I'm going to say. And is that I need to put a picture too of you in your bookworm glasses.
Please do not.
Yeah, the kamikazes.
Well, let me just go ahead and
goggles.
share why I've.
Yeah, let us
the
know.
last couple of times we've recorded, I've had these beauties on.
Yeah.
Okay. I even had someone tell me in the McDonald's not parking lot, but in the McDonald's drive-through, he said, "I like your glasses. They're different, but they're really cool." And I said, "They might be different, but they are nowhere near cool."
Yeah.
I think he thought that I just was choosing to wear these.
Yeah.
So I have to say, I found out that I had cataracts. I told the eye doctor I was way too young for that.
Well, you are. That was kind of a surprise.
Yes. And, surprisingly.
Most people, you're 70 and most people don't do them until they're 80.
Surprisingly, he told me that he had had a patient that was 17 with them. I don't know what causes it or why, but anyway, I had 2 of them, as you know. One was really bad in the right eye. So when he suggested that I get them removed, he also told me that they could there's a new LASIK that's out. I don't know how new it is, but it's light adjusted lens. And so I got referred to Commonwealth Eye Surgery here in Lexington, Kentucky. And I was a candidate for that. And so I went in, as you know, on a Monday and had the right eye done, and a Tuesday and had the left eye done. Yes, I was extremely nervous because, I don't handle needles or procedures or anything well at all. But I do have to say they were exceptional there. The glasses, I have to wear them. I have another procedure done in a few more days, and then I can come out of these beauties. And I know me mostly, I'm going to be so missing them so terribly.
I bet, yeah. And again, we're not really doing a commercial for Commonwealth Eye Surgery.
No, we aren't.
But we're going to shout them out because lo and behold, they're
so good to me.
And they're true crime fans.
Okay.
I mean, there's always a plus right there.
Dr. Patel, I have to call her by name because we made the connection over one of my adjustments. Somehow true crime actually, it was from the tech in there, Matt. We were talking about it when she walked in, and he told her that we did the podcast. He said, I recognize your voice. I just didn't know where. And he actually had watched and listened to the Lydia Blanche Cassidy
There we go.
that we had covered, domestic violence murder, a few years ago. And so his wife worked with Lydia, and he said, I knew your voice from somewhere. It was from the podcast. So when he told Dr. Patel, she was just kind of blown away because she, like most of us, love true crime.
Sure.
So Dr. Lance Ferguson did the surgery, and Dr. Patel has done all of my follow-ups and my adjustments, thus the name Light Adjusted Lens. Sure. And no, they are not paying us. We did not get requested. It's just, I had such a great experience with them. I am very pleased. It was a very unique procedure to see far away and then take distance away in one eye to give you up close in another. So there was quite an adjustment period of that balance. I'm still kind of dealing with it, but overall, I'm so pleased, and I couldn't be more happy with my vision.
Well, I'm excited
now.
for you too to have that vision, because everybody I've talked to enjoys that. So there's our big shout out to Commonwealth
Eye Surgery. They did
and
great.
the fine staff out there.
And to you, Dr. Patel, I told you I'd talk about you.
Exactly.
You've done great also.
Good deal. Well, that said, let's go ahead and roll into what we're going to talk about. Is that this is one of your picks, the Menendez Brothers?
It was, and I just have to go on because I'm so excited to tell you that we've got to do Jeffrey Dahmer next. That's my next.
Mm-hmm.
I've followed that for years. But the Menendez Brothers, it happened in 89, August of 89, actually. And I was so blown away because they were not that much older than me at that point when they did this, a little bit older than me. But, well, David, without going into too much detail, why don't you tell us a little summary of what the Menendez Brothers case is about?
Absolutely. Okay, now the Menendez Brothers case is one of the most infamous parricide cases in American history, parricide being the murder of parents by their children. So what we're looking at is at the time of the murder, on around August 20th, 1989, Lyle Menendez, who was 21 at the time, and his brother Eric Menendez, who was 18 at the time, were accused of murdering their wealthy parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, in a big mansion in Beverly Hills, California. It caught fire as a case. That's why I'm going to run through just the basics of what the case is for people to catch them up. And for the listeners, if I miss something, it's not intentional. And if I get something wrong, comment down below so we can straighten the record out. But let's go. The best way to look at this is probably take people back in time and follow the timeline of the incident and the investigation that followed. So on August 20th, 1989 is when the murders took place. It's reported that at about 10 p.m., Jose and Kitty Menendez were brutally shot in their Beverly Hills home with 12-gauge shotguns, which for anybody that's been around that's a very violent scene when a shotgun is used like that because of the damage that it creates to the victim. Now, at 11:47 p.m., it's reported that Eric and Lyle Menendez actually called 911, and they were sobbing and claiming their parents had murdered. So there's the first little thing is that discrepancy between the belief that the murders happened at 10 and they were called at 11:47 p.m., I guess on their arrival home. During August of 1989, the initial investigation takes place, and originally it's reported that the police thought that the murders were a mob hit, probably due to the status of Mr. Menendez in the community out there maybe, and because of the fact that they appear to be execution style in nature. At the first part of it, investigators really had no signs of forced entry, which suggested what you could call an inside job or somebody who had access to the home. Sometimes that's a trusted person or somebody that was already in the house. And the brothers provided inconsistent alibis were not immediately suspects. And if you watch some of the documentaries, you'll see that they actually mock the police for missing things, physical evidence that was out in their car. Now, in late 1989 and early 1990, the two brothers started demonstrating suspicious behavior, which started to bring the attention of the police, but later captivated the people in the country that were watching this case. They began to spend money like crazy that came from their parents' estate. They were buying luxury cars, Rolex watches, a multi-million-dollar real estate deal, and a restaurant. And so that started to get people's attention and for the investigators, it got their attention because the Menendez estate was estimated worth was around $14 million. In March 1990, There's a big break in the case. Tons of documentaries go into more detail on this, but basically what had happened, Eric confessed to his psychologist, detailing the murders. Now, the psychologist, unknown to Eric, was recording those sessions. What makes it even more bizarre on how the break happened is the psychologist had a mistress, and the mistress later exposed the confessions to authorities. So he shared the information with her, probably, I guess, maybe let her listen to the recordings. Later, she goes forward. That's the thing. That's the break that investigators are looking for, is somebody inside this chain of information to cut loose and talk. So what happens? The police begin surveillance, and they finally built a case against the brothers. In March 8th, 1990, Lau Menendez was arrested. He was outside of his Beverly Hills home and was taken into custody. Eric, who was in Israel for a tennis tournament, was advised to return to the United States. So he returns, and on March 11th, 1990, he's arrested by turning himself into the Los Angeles Police Department. Both of them are formally charged with first-degree murder. So they're in custody, they're housed, and now the prosecution and the trials begin. In 1992, the process starts with some legal battles over admissibility of evidence. The defense challenged the use of the taped confession by the psychiatrist, claiming doctor-patient privilege. Not unusual, not unrealistic, but the California Supreme Court ruled that portions of the tapes could be used, which weakened the defense. A lot of hopes went dashed with that. In July 1993, the first trial begins. It was broadcast nationally, which theirs with a whole story caught on fire once again as far as the media attention. The defense team actually used some defenses that, as in, they acted in self-defense. The two boys acted in self-defense, alleging that they had years of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse at the hand of their father. The prosecution's argument was that the murders were premeditated for financial gain, that excessive spending showed motive, and the brutal nature of the crime suggested a direct intent to kill. Of course, the defense countered back with their argument that the boys acted out of fear, believing that their father would kill them. And they actually went ahead because they had to defend themselves with the killing of their mother, Kitty Menendez, and she was portrayed as a complicit enabler of all the abuse. Now, this was also something that they had offered, as Eric had documented past trauma related to sexual abuse. In January 1994, the first trial ends in a hung jury. The jury deadlocked. The numbers on the jury polling were 9-3 in favor of manslaughter for Eric and 8-4 in favor of manslaughter for Lyle. That's a pretty scattered jury decision. Clearly, that jury had a lot in front of them to work with, and a mistrial was declared. Back at it again, in October 1995, the second trial begins. This time, the standing judge, the judge holding court, ruled that no testimony about sexual abuse would be allowed in, which, of course, was a big dent in the defense case. The trial was not televised this time because of all the sensationalism that developed over the first trial. Go ahead, we get into March 20, 1996. The trial's over. It goes to the jury, and they come back with a guilty verdict. The jury convicted both brothers of first-degree murder. Notice the difference between the previous trial of manslaughter. They were sentenced to life in prison without parole. July 2nd, 1996 is the sentencing hearing. When that's over, Lyle and Eric were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and they were sent to 2 different prisons so they wouldn't be housed together. Now, in some of the things that happened after that trial, in 2018 the brothers were reunited in the same facility after being decades apart, and new evidence had emerged claiming that possible connection between Jose Menendez and a known abuser in Hollywood had sparked interest in reopening the case. And that's where we are today. Are the Menendez brothers going to have their sentence reduced, and could they stand a chance of walking out without serving their life in prison? As far as March 2025, when we're recording this, the Menendez brothers, both Lyle and Eric, continue their efforts to be released from prison with the assistance of their counsel. They've been serving those life sentences without parole since 1996 for those 1989 murders of their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez. Okay, so what does it look like? From the district attorney's stance in Los Angeles, Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan Hochman has expressed that he would consider resentencing the brothers only if they, quote, sincerely and unequivocally admit, end quote, to the full extent of their crimes and acknowledge any previous falsehoods regarding the murders. Interesting, there is no question that they murdered their parents. They have admitted to that. Hochman withdrew a previous motion for resentencing filed by his predecessor, George Gascon, and has been skeptical of the brothers' claims of sexual abuse by the father, citing a lack of corroborative evidence presented during their trials. There's a big difference between new evidence and alternative theories. The family members and supporters of the brothers have criticized Hochman's position, of course, accusing him of focusing on politics rather than justice. They argue that the brothers have been rehabilitated during their incarceration and deserve release. Rehabilitated. Okay, gotcha. The parole hearing is scheduled right now as of this recording. California Gavin Newsom has announced that the Menendez brothers are scheduled to appear before a parole board on June 13th, 2025. The hearing will include a risk assessment involving public safety experts and psychologists to evaluate the brothers' suitability for reentry into society. That will be a circus. Okay, let me finish with that new evidence. It's just basically the brothers' legal team has presented what they call evidence alleging that their father, Jose Menendez, sexually abused them. They claim this includes a letter from Eric to his cousin in 1988 detailing the abuse and allegations from a former member of the boy band Menudo. Wow, where'd that come from? Who claims he was also abused by Jose Menendez. However, Hochman, the Los Angeles County District Attorney, has dismissed these claims as insufficiently corroborated and opposed granting a new trial based on this evidence.
To just know that they murdered their parents. And one of my three things.
Well, let's go into those if we're going to go, because we need to get right to
my three things. That's what I'm saying. One of my three things.
Number one.
Number one. Why did they murder their parents? They were getting money. It's not like they were being cut off.
It's a good one. That's a good one.
So why do you have to murder them? They're giving you everything. Cars, private tennis lessons, anything these boys wanted.
I'll bet some of the viewers and listeners have thought that too, is the big why. You know, their
estate
was worth like $14 million or something, which doesn't sound like much now, I guess. But
in 89,
that's a lot of money.
Yes, and it was in Beverly Hills. You just don't hear of that in Beverly Hills.
That's exactly. So that is it. They call it parricide, when you kill your parents, and it's not uncommon. We see cases to this day where you'll have somebody that's been murdered, and lo and behold, people wonder why the detectives focus on the family so fast is, central to the victim. And then the relationship is usually there too. So I always wondered that too. And again, I think what you're hitting is the thing that's most fascinating is you had it coming. So what do you think it was? Was it greed? Was it impatience? A little bit of both? Or?
Well, that leads into my second. There were the allegations of the sexual abuse.
Right.
So I don't know. And apparently it had been going on for quite a while, even as the boys were older. So I don't know if that was the catalyst for it, but I tend to think with the speed in which they ran through all that money, again, it makes you question, why do you have to kill them? You're getting the money.
That's it.
But maybe it was the lump sum they were going to get, because, they were getting new cars and Rolex and clothes and seats to the Lakers right there on the floor. And the stuff they were buying was crazy. So I'm inclined to say greed, because they went through the money really quick. But then it lends to was there sexual abuse, and the guys were tired of it. I think the mom knew about it, according to their testimony. If she did,
she'd be at least an enabler, if not a facilitator.
Right.
Yeah.
So that leads into my second thing, which is the allegations of sexual abuse. But I don't know. I'm going to go with probably greed. And if the sexual abuse allegations were true, I hate to say I can't blame them, but I could see why they would be tired of it and want to put a stop to it.
That's a defense theory for sure.
Right.
Too, for sure. What about your number 3 then?
My number 3, the confession that Eric made to his counselor that he killed them. And then the counselor told his mistress, who told the police. And I'm not advocating getting away with it by any means, so I hope it doesn't come across as this. But why tell? They were on the police radar. They were, especially with how quickly they were spending the money. But why make the confession to the therapist? I don't know why he made the confession.
Right. Just telling. And I think it speaks to what we talk about on all these cases, is that with I think with the investigators, that's that break they're looking for. Is what they're looking for is somebody in a chain of that communication to leave the chain, right? So she could have stayed quiet. He could have been quiet. You said it was Eric or Lyle? Was it Eric?
It was Eric who told.
Exactly. So Eric didn't have to divulge that, but again, Eric was holding on to the client privilege that you have with people that are assisting with you, and I can't say how strong that is. I want to say that I thought there were exceptions on things that big too, but maybe somebody out there listening that knows more about the case or knows more about that part of the law where they live could advise is that privilege, that communication privilege, is it absolute?
Yeah, even with murder of your parents.
That's what I'm saying. Because, for example, you have people that may tell clergy, counseling, therapist, psychologist, a psychiatrist is, and I could have looked, I just didn't take the time to look, but how absolute is that? Then even if it's there, there's the ethical conundrum of the person that takes that information in. I think we feel pretty sure that in active things of abuse and things like that has to be reported. And like in Kentucky, I think there's legislation that says that does. But the interesting thing right there is, you're right.
Yes.
Is but that's where these cases fall, is people talk, and where they talk, But again, the trick is somebody who's been told, will they leave that world of keeping it secret? On all the unsolveds that we've done so far and will continue to, that's what we're clutching our fingers together so hard for, is somebody's got to shoot their mouth. Somebody, if your conscience gets to you, that they come forward. If guilt, if fear of your own prosecution and being involved, is again, we do that. So luckily for the police is that happened, because that right there was when they actually started putting up surveillance on the boys and then building a case on that. I do know that there was a suppression attempt to try to get that statement and all that suppressed, but a judge in California eventually ruled that the key integral parts could come in, and maybe the other stuff, which it looks like they were trying to balance what's left of that privileged communication on his mental health or his services and everything. So good three things.
Yeah, it just makes me wonder if he hadn't told.
Oh, we may not know. We may not know.
They might have gotten away with it.
We know so much now because it's in the past, and they've been interviewed and they've been to trial, and that's why we know so much now. So when we armchair quarterback, it feels natural. But I'm with you. Go back to that moment of not knowing, because there wasn't a whole lot of direct stuff that was pointing to them in the beginning. We know now that even in one of the documentaries I did probably walk through the room on, is that they were kind of mocking the police for missing some of the physical evidence in one of their cars that morning. So that's it. So to summarize, what's Wendy's three things? One more time, what's number one again?
Why did they murder the parents when they were getting the money?
There we go. I love it. And number two?
Number two, the sexual abuse allegations.
Whether they're true or not, right? You gotcha.
And number three, his confession to the counselor and the counselor's telling the mistress.
Loose lips sink ships.
Thank
God. And again, thank God for the mistress to again bolt out and do that. I think.
Well, she did that because she was wanting to be with him.
Yeah, sure.
And he had a wife.
Yeah.
That I guess wasn't.
Hell hath no fury.
That's right.
That's it.
So I guess it was kind of like, you're not going to leave your wife and be with me.
I need to.
She was a patient too. I do have to say that she had her own issues. Problem.
Well, and he did too. If he's dealing with a patient.
Yeah, they had a
there's
thing
a whole
going
other
on.
ethical
She started out as a patient.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a big ugly.
Yeah,
in
you
that
don't
thing
do that.
Too. No. Good three things. So
thank you
for everybody that's listening or watching. Let us know what you think about those three things. Now, mine kind of cross over to yours a little bit. Of course, we talk before we sit down to kind of have an idea where we're going with this. But my first one is something that I've wrestled with for a long time, and that's some of the people in the public eye that have paid attention to this case is this fascination with the Menendez brothers themselves, two young, high lifestyle kids, again, like you said, having anything they want, and to be candid, very attractive, handsome people. And what I've watched over the years that I did grasp is how many people camp immediately on their side, even though they admitted to killing their parents. That's not in question. But the influence that that lifestyle and that physical appearance appears to have on people, and how it skews their judgment a little bit, and that they get a bias built on that maybe like, well, they don't look like they could do that.
Yeah, they don't look creepy like what you think a murderer looks like.
That's it, exactly. Yeah, but then again, that's past that first thing you talked about, who kills their parents, right?
Right.
Is that so? That was my number one, is that fascination, because it comes into play in cases frequently. There's a fantastic book that I'll recommend for the audience called Guilty: The Collapse of Criminal Justice by Judge Harold Rothwachs. He's been passed away for several years. I think Ray the D.A. Larson, rest in peace, actually interviewed him on his radio show one time. But the book is about a judge in New York that I believe he was a chapter president of the ACLU as a defense attorney. So he was very strong on advocating for defendants and doing the right thing. We've talked about that before, the importance of that. But then he gets seated on the bench. He becomes a judge, and he starts seeing things from that side that he sees that are wrong in the criminal justice system. Tons of stuff. Read the book. It really makes you wonder where we're at. And when we say the justice system is broke, I'm going to argue it's broke from a couple different sides. But here we go to my point. He actually talks about how he has reservations about the unanimous jury verdict in a serious criminal trial where everybody has to be on board. And we know what that looks like when, in this case, that there was a mistrial because the jury got hung on the boys, and the first trial was a mistrial because the jury got hung. Well, here's his point, and back to my point. He cites several cases in his book where the holdout juror, the one that was holding the conviction back, was holding out because of things like this, that the defendant didn't look like he could be an armed robber, that the defendant didn't look like they could be of this lifestyle. And the problem with that is that, and Judge Rothwachs argued, is that bias has nothing to do with the case facts that are presented, and it has nothing to do with proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Because that's not reasonable doubt, is looking at somebody and saying, I think you're too handsome to be a killer, is there. So it's kind of like the thing with Ted Bundy, where I've read that supposedly there's women that have his dental impressions tattooed on their body somewhere. And when I was researching this case, getting prepared and looking for graphics, I actually stumbled across a fleece blanket throw with the Menendez brothers on them. So this ideal, I don't know, I guess, do people not realize that despite their lifestyle and their good looks and stuff like that, that these are dangerous people?
Yeah, I think they don't care. I mean, they were getting marriage proposals. The one got married.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I think a couple times.
Kind of crazy. So that was my number one, is that I picked up, but it's not uncommon, and we see it in different cases.
Oh, sure.
My number two is the most recent information on the case, where there's this attention being given to the fact that can they get out of prison early? They were sentenced to life without parole, right? So they're in. And then the headlines start reading that the defense teams, the new defense teams, now have, quote unquote, new evidence that they want to have it looked at. And it's caused quite a stir. There was a DA in Los Angeles County that was going to examine that. That DA got replaced. The new DA was like, whoa, pull your horses back a little bit. I don't know about this, and whatnot. So there's always a thing on that. Well, so then you got to look at it and say, okay, what was that new evidence? Well, the new evidence is evidently a claim that they have fortified these sexual abuse claims. I think it's through a letter that was written in 1988 from one of the boys to his cousin or something, and that's their evidence. Well, oddly enough, I think what strikes me about that is the conversation has to be, what's the difference between real evidence, formidable evidence that it has value, to submitting an alternative theory? And that get confused a lot. A lot of times when you see people that say, I've got something new on a case, and they start a petition and everything, most of the time when I see that, they're presenting what you would call an alternative theory, and that's just it. It's a theory. Appeals courts don't usually examine those and go with those, because there's nothing in those theories usually that's tangible that you can point to and say, hey, that's real. That if I bring this in the court, it'll survive the best evidence rule. It'll survive everything we need to survive. and it's enough for a jury to consider, again, on that proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I think this latest thing that's got everybody touted up, and now you've got two camps. You got the people that, oh, they're so handsome and whatever, that they should get out of prison. You've got them, and then the diehards like me that say, no, they shouldn't. But I think we're following an alternative theory. I think we're following that people are being ginned up on something that there's already the latest DA out there has already said, hold your horses. This doesn't look like evidence to me. If you're going to have that process kick into gear, it's got to be something. So my number 2 is, are we being drug along with an alternative theory instead of real evidence? And I think that's the case. Number 3 goes back to your number 2. So we'll do some Common Core math.
All right.
My number 3 comes back to your number 2. The allegations of sexual abuse. And maybe even the emotional and physical abuse, because there was allegations that the father was very demanding and domineering, and even then you got to look at, well, was he pushing? Because with our own children, we do want to challenge them, and how bad was that? Was it really that bad, or was it somebody that didn't want to be pushed and challenged? Maybe they, with a silver spoon in your mouth, you didn't think you had to do that. But the sex abuse thing is in a higher order. So my thing is, along with the alternative theory thing, let's assume it's true. Let's assume that that it's proven, or that we just believe that they were sexually abused, or one of them was sexually abused, or whatever. Here's my conundrum and the ethical issue with that. If that's found to be true, does that mean that their punishment should be mitigated on that? And that's a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like okay, life without parole, but since they were victimized, do we pull that back and look at a potential release date? Does that make sense?
Yeah, because then there's their justification of why they did what they did.
That's it. And even if we accept that, yes, that happened, and that yes, that was their reasoning, 2 lives were still taken. Mm-hmm. Does that mean? I'd be interested to see what people think. And again, no right or wrong in it, because it's
right.
It's one of those things there isn't a right or wrong to. I know personally I don't believe in it, but I don't want to sway anything with that, because I know people will have good points if they comment on our YouTube channel about that. But it's that philosophical, ethical thing of, okay, accept that those 2 things are present. Do they get out early?
Right. And did it warrant murder?
That's it. Because then, okay, to kind of chip away at that, everything you said earlier is what defeats any of that. The greed, the money, the spending, the intentional killing, the deception after the killing, and all that kind of stuff. It was when I had true self-defense acts when I was doing the job. I will just say this: the people that didn't go on the run, or if they left the scene, they made themselves really available, and that's the first thing they'd say is, I did this. And even if they had an attorney meet us and everything, is that's it. The other thing is, ethically, you look at it, because we see the same defense in battered spouse syndromes and stuff like that, is that what we think is a build-up, and then I can't take it anymore. But as a society, here's the thing: do we allow room for that extrajudicial conduct of making that decision?
Right.
And how much time passes? And I guess for me is that I still think that's the outlier. So my argument would be, as bad as this sounds, we live in a world where likely hundreds of thousands, if not more, people face some kind of abuse in their lifetime. It's been like from time immemorial. One day maybe we'll get better about it. And most everybody doesn't do that. They escape, they get therapy, they report it to the police or whatever. But again, when you've got a case like this, it is, do we ever want to go down that slippery slope of relativism and say, yeah, that's justifiable? Because, man, once you open that to me, it's a huge box.
Right.
Because what you think is justifiable and what I think is different. And again, that in our world, what the delineating things have been is that no matter what you feel, no matter what you think, there's a few things you don't do. You don't take people's stuff and you don't break it. You don't hurt people. You don't physically abuse people. You don't take it out. And, man, for the love of God, you don't take their life.
Right.
We believe, no matter what country and the differences in the system, is we believe that we take that somewhere else to have that. So that was my third,
Okay.
is that ethical conundrum over if we accept the physical abuse is what's that mean? Does it mean that they get mulligans and points and whatnot? And I'll stop there because we could get into whether or not you can rehabilitate those people or not. But I'll leave it in my opinion. Hell no, they stay in 25 to life because everything that I have seen on them, they're scary individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just be candid that they're spooky individuals, that there's an evil mechanism that drives behind there.
Sure, because they plotted it for some time before they did it.
So,
and they even went, if people haven't seen it, I don't want to give the whole documentary away, but they were in a real rush to go to the movies and get a ticket. Well, the movie had already started, and the little girl at the window was adamant she wasn't going to sell them a ticket. The movie had already started. You got to get the ticket to the next show, and
that's
they wanted that one ticket for the 10 o'clock show, whatever it was.
Scores of things that is wrong with their whole plan, where they were able to nick away at all those alibi attempts. I thought it was good. So that's our 3 things, which makes 6. That's a half dozen.
So we want our listeners to comment on what they think of our 3 things, and certainly what their 3 things are.
Yeah, if you're watching, let us know what you think about ours, and really jump in and what are your 3 things or your big things, and what about the case? We just flushed over it pretty quick. There's so much more to it.
Oh yeah.
What about the case do you want to add that you see from a source, and let's jump in and do that. So,
and I have to say, aside of Jeffrey Dahmer, what other ideas do you have that you want us to look into? I'm always open to watching something that I've not watched or talking about something I've not talked about.
I'll say it again. I'll be the first to tell you that a lot of the cases that people talk about, and when the people ask me about it, I'm like, what's that? And I look like a complete rube being out of that thing, but it's because
you don't
of being
sit
busy.
in front of the TV like I do.
No, I don't.
Researching this stuff.
I know, yeah, because I did it for a living. It's always a bone to pick with you.
But you know what? You might have, but you'll be in those glasses, and I'm coming out
That's
of these
true.
next Tuesday,
Exactly.
and I'm going to end
Sharp
it.
as a tack.
I'm going to end it with, I'm still so proud of my doctors and my new eyes and Commonwealth.
Well, I'm excited
eye
for you.
surgery.
I'm excited
and
for
I'm
you.
excited too.
So with that, have a good listen, a good watch. Jump in with your ideas.
Yeah,
and,
share with us your thoughts.
and let us know what you think. The Murder Police podcast is hosted by Wendy and David Lyons and was created to honor the lives of crime victims, so their names are never forgotten. It is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lyons. The Murder Police podcast can be found on your favorite Apple or Android podcast platform, as well as at murderpolicepodcast.com, where you will find show notes, transcripts, information about our presenters, and a link to the official Murder Police podcast merch store, where you can purchase a huge variety of Murder Police podcast swag. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, which is closed caption for those that are hearing impaired. Just search for the Murder Police podcast and you will find us. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe for more and give us 5 stars and a written review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts. Make sure you set your player to automatically download new episodes so you get the new ones as soon as they drop. And please tell your friends. Lock it down, Judy.